All right. Hi, everyone. As you're getting started and joining us, we will officially start the webinar in just a couple of minutes. We're just waiting for a couple more folks to join. All right. It looks like we are starting to get to quorum. I know folks will be joining in a little bit, but let's just go ahead and get started for everyone else here. I am Hannah Beasley, and I work at AARP Foundation and lead our student loan work. And today we are very excited, as always, to have Kira and Anna here from the National Consumer Law Center for our fourth webinar on student loan debt. And again, today, as you've seen, our topic is dealing with default. So I will pass it off to Anna and Kira, and they will take it away.
Thanks, Hannah. So my name's Kira Taylor. I'm a student loan expert at the National Consumer Law Center, where I have the privilege of working on policy issues, interacting with legal aid attorneys, and interacting with private attorneys around the country on student loan issues. And I am so excited that all of you are here today, and that if you're watching later, that you're watching this webinar as well. Before we dive into content, I'm going to toss it over to my co-host, Anna Anderson.
Hi, thank you. I'm Anna Anderson. I'm a staff attorney at NCLC with Kira, and we are excited to be here today to be speaking with you about this important topic. As we have in our previous webinar series, we get a lot of questions that we get from borrowers about how to manage their student loan debt. Today, we're going to be speaking specifically about what to do if you fall behind and you default on your federal student loans. So with that, I'm going to pass it back to Kira to just kick us off.
Thanks, Anna. So I will say the student loan system is incredibly complex, but Anna and I have both worked with a number of clients who have been in default on their federal student loans. And federal student loan default, unlike other issues, can carry a lot of shame for a lot of borrowers. So I just want to call that out if you're joining us today and you're in default on your federal student loans. However, I also want you to know that even though it may feel like you're alone, there are millions of other people in the same situation. So today there are over 6 million people that are in default and over 7 million people who have missed payments and are about to default on their federal student loans. That is a significant portion of the federal student loan portfolio. That's almost 1 in 4. So if you find yourself in default, you are not alone at all. I also wanted to elevate that government data shows that older borrowers in particular are twice as likely to have a loan in default as younger borrowers, and that 500,000 borrowers in default are receiving Social Security benefits. So if you're an older person and you have federal student loans in default, you are certainly not alone. There are many other people in the same situation. Today, we're going to help give you tools to demystify how you can get out of default, how your loans got into default in the first place, what happens when your loan defaults, how you can tell if your loans are in default, because even that can be complicated. And then we're going to talk about how you get out of default and what to do if you're not eligible to get out of default. At the end, there's been a lot happening in the student loan world, so we're going to talk about updates. And then at the very, very end of the slide deck, there will be resources. We will email, you will receive this slide deck and all of the links afterwards. This is also being recorded, so you can watch this training again afterwards. And we would love to see your questions. And we will reserve time at the end to answer any of the questions that we haven't covered during our presentation. So please use the Q&A at the bottom right-hand side of your screen to ask us questions as we go. No question is too small. And we really want to make sure that you're walking away with more tools to handle your student loan debt. In addition, one other flag is that we are going to provide general information about student loan default. We cannot provide you with individualized legal advice on your own loans. Some of these things you may be watching this and being like, whoa, I can't do this on my own. That's okay. At the end of the slide deck, we provide resources on how to find legal help to help you with your student loan options, especially when it comes to getting out of default. But today we're going to provide you with information about how the system works at large. So with that, we can move on to the next slide.
Great. So let's get into the basics of what it means when federal student loans are in default. This is very different than if you have private student loans. So if you're talking with someone who has private student loans, or you have your own private student loans and you're behind on those payments, you're in default, that's not going to apply to what we're discussing today. We are talking purely about federal student loans, but the majority of student loans out there, 98% of them, are federal student loans. So this is going to apply to most student loan borrowers. So in talking about federal student loans in default, what does it actually mean when loans are in default? So generally, a federal student loan is considered to be in default after 270 days of failing to make a scheduled payment. Now, periods of forbearances and deferments do not count towards this 270 days. So if you're in a forbearance or a deferment, you pause your payments temporarily, that will not count in terms of adding up to missing payments and being considered potentially in default. Additionally, if you're on an income-driven repayment plan or an IDR plan, and your payment is actually $0 per month, that also is considered a payment technically, and those months of $0 payments don't count towards this timeline of 270 days to fall behind and be considered to be in default. So when people talk about defaulted student loans, there are a lot of reasons that get thrown around of why that should not happen, and this is really the borrower's fault. But we just want to, emphasize that there are a lot of reasons people fall behind on their student loans that aren't their fault, and they're really just trying their best to manage their student loan debt. So some of the reasons why people might fall behind on their student loans and default on their student loans is that they just really aren't aware that they actually owed on these loans in the first place. We talked to a number of parent borrowers who take out Parent Plus loans to help support their children's education, and they mistakenly believe that their child is actually responsible for the payments instead of themselves. But that is unfortunately not the case. If you take out Parent Plus loans, it's the parent who is responsible for paying back the loans, not the child. So that is, one common reason we see why people potentially fall behind on these payments. Also, some people don't realize that they have potentially multiple different loan servicers and multiple different loans for different periods of education or for different loan types. So they might not actually realize that they're not making all of their payments correctly. They might be paying one loan servicer and they think that they're on track, but they don't realize that they're actually missing payments that they owe to another loan servicer. It can be very complicated if you have a lot of different loans out there in terms of just managing who your payments are owed to, what time you have to make those payments, which is, sometimes unfortunately people get confused and they will fall behind on their payments for those reasons. Additionally, we talk to a lot of borrowers who just aren't able to make a full payment. They're only able to make a partial payment, and they don't, realize that a partial payment is not something that's going to count, and they are, still to be paying on their loans, but unfortunately, they could set themselves up to fall behind and enter into default if they're not making those full on-time payments. Because of that, that is a big reason why people default. And, folks are just not being told by their loan servicers that they actually have other options in those situations if they can't make a full on-time payment, such as putting a pause on their student loan payments in a forbearance or deferment, or even signing up for an income-driven repayment plan that would make their payments more affordable because it would be based on their income and their family size and not just based on the loan amount. So that is a very common reason why people fall behind on their student loans and may end up in default. Finally, we also see people who just don't have the right information with their loan servicer, and the loan servicer may be sending their bills to an old address, or to an old email address, and borrowers just aren't made aware of the fact that they have to make these payments. Now, unfortunately, this is one thing where really borrowers have to do their homework, and they have to make sure that they are updating their mailing address and their email address and all of their contact information with both their loan servicer, which is the company that collects payments, and the Department of Education. So it's really on the borrower in these situations to make sure that they are updating their servicers and that they're getting their bills on time. We talk to borrowers a lot, especially now after the payment pause has ended, who haven't heard anything about their loans in years, and they just assume that, you know, they've been paid off, they've been canceled, they've been discharged, and that they're now gone. Unfortunately, this is a common misconception. Even if you haven't heard anything about your federal student loans in a number of years, it does not necessarily mean that they are gone. Unlike other forms of debt, there is no statute of limitations for collecting on federal student loans. This means that if you don't pay off your loans, or you don't get them discharged or canceled under some program specifically to do that, the government can continue to collect that outstanding debt indefinitely. So even if you haven't heard anything about your loans in months or years, the government may still be able to contact you to collect on these loans. So unfortunately, don't assume that if you haven't made payments in 5 or 6 years, that they can't come after you. For federal student loan debt, they can and they will. So what happens after a loan defaults? So if you haven't made payments on your student loans in over 270 days and your loans are in default, you are going to be ineligible for other forms of credit that come from the federal government. This includes additional student aid if you want to go back to school, but it also includes things like federal mortgages and some forms of federal business loans. So that can be a big hurdle for people that, they are not necessarily aware of. The loan will also be transferred from your normal servicer to a special default servicer. Now, if you defaulted recently, if this just happened within the last few months, if it hasn't been transferred to that new default loan servicer, you may be able to catch it quickly and call to see if you can have your loans removed from default and get back into affordable repayment plan. But that is only going to apply to people who just recently defaulted. So if you've been in default for a long time and you're already with a default loan servicer, you're not going to be able to use this option to quickly get out of default. Once you default on your loan, in addition to being transferred to a new servicer, your debt is accelerated. Now, that means that all of the principal and interest are due, and the government can also add fines and fees to your debt as well. And these fees can be really expensive and make it really difficult for you to pay it all back, either in a lump sum or in some other type of repayment plan. Now, the government will send you a notice when your loans are in default, but again, you have to make sure your address is updated with the government, with the Department of Education, and with your loan servicer. So if you didn't get that notice, make sure that they have your correct information. Once the government, sends you that notice and says that your loans are in default, they can then use collection powers that they have to collect on your student loan debt unless you act within a certain period of time. So when you receive this notice, if you've gotten this notice recently, or if you've received these notices in the past, it's really key that you don't ignore it. It means your loans are in default and you have to take steps now, or you could face some real financial consequences, including collection activity. And the government can do a lot of things to collect on these student loans. So you may have heard us speak about this in a previous webinar, but just to reiterate this, the government can garnish your wages, they can take your tax refunds, they can even take a portion of your Social Security benefits or other types of federal payments or benefits to collect on these student loans. Now, the government cannot take SSI or VA benefits, but general Social Security benefits and other types of federal payments and benefits are potentially at risk of being seized to pay back on these federal student loans. And unlike other types of debt, the government does not need to take you to court to use these powers to start collecting. They can actually do this without a court order, and it can happen very quickly. So if your loans are in default, we highly recommend that you act right away to try to avoid a type of collection action like this. In some rare cases, the government will sue borrowers to collect the debt, but we see this very, very rarely. And that's just because they can take all of these steps to get payment without having to sue you first. So this is really, I think, mind-blowing for some people, that they are not aware that Social Security benefits could be taken, that your tax refunds could be taken, and that's because those are usually protected for other types of debt. This is something specific to government debt, and if you owe a debt to the government, they will collect from you in a lot of different ways. One thing I just want to say is that before the government will begin any type of wage garnishment or Social Security offset, they will send you a notice just letting you know that they are going to take this action that will give you a short period of time to try to object to the collection activity. But while this is happening now, not all of the collection powers have been turned on again at this point. Right now, the government has said that they're still not going to take Social Security benefits to collect on federal student loan debt. They also are not currently taking wages to collect on defaulted federal student loans. But those two powers will be turned on again soon. So don't count on this pause on Social Security offsets or wage garnishments to last forever. In fact, the government said it's probably going to happen very, very shortly, particularly with wage garnishments. We've heard from the Department of Education that they are going to turn that on at some point this summer, which is coming up very shortly. We're almost at the end of summer here, so we're anticipating that Social Security offsets and wage garnishments could begin again very soon. In addition, tax refund seizures and seizures of other types of federal payments and federal benefits have already restarted. So we have heard from borrowers who have already had their tax refunds seized again now that the payment pause is over, and they are facing those collection consequences currently. So if you are in default or you're at risk of being in default very shortly, you need to take steps to get out of default or to avoid default if you want to also avoid these collection actions. The main story here that we're going to tell you today is just don't ignore any notices that you get either from the government or from your loan servicer. If you receive a notice that your loans are in default, you need to take steps very soon to try to get out of default and avoid a collection activity. If you think that your loans shouldn't be in default or that there is some type of error here, you definitely want to object to the notice that you receive. Additionally, if you've applied for a cancellation or discharge program, like the total and permanent disability discharge, and you get a notice that your loans are in default, you absolutely want to object to that and explain to the department why collections should not occur and why this all should be paused. If you are objecting, make sure to include as much information as you can in the letter, including a copy of an application if you've applied for a discharge program, so that the government knows that you are waiting for a decision on that and you shouldn't be subject to collections. So very quickly, I know that this is something we've gone over in the past, but I want to make sure people know how to tell if their loans are in default, because it can be difficult. That 270-day payment calculation may not necessarily be the easiest to figure out on your own. But the good news is that if you log into your accounts on studentaid.gov, you should be able to tell very quickly if you are in default or not on your federal student loans. So the first and easiest way to do this is to log into your account on studentaid.gov, and we'll go over this in a minute. That will tell you whether or not your loans are in default in a few different places. Additionally, if you're having difficulty logging onto studentaid.gov or you don't trust what's on there and you just want to be sure, you can also call the Default Resolution Group. We've got their phone number here, and ask them if you have any loans in default. So the default resolution group is the loan servicer for direct loans and some Fell and Perkins loans. So they service a number of defaulted federal student loans, but not all of them. So just because you don't have a loan that is being serviced by the default resolution group, it doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have any loans in default, but it is a good just sort of backup to determine whether or not you have some loans in default with the federal government. So another sort of flag, and if you haven't done this in a while and you're just not sure and you're not sure if this applies to you, if you had received a notice in the past saying that your Social Security check or your tax refunds were going to be seized, or if you had experienced that in the past, if your Social Security benefits were reduced or you had your tax refunds seized by the government, it is possible that that was seized because you have a defaulted federal student loan. So if this has been, a few years since this has happened and you never actually took any steps to get out of default or to, get into some type of loan rehabilitation or consolidation to get out of default, it's possible that your loans are still in default. So remember that the COVID-19 payment pause actually stopped most collection activity on defaulted student loans from 2020 until actually just earlier this year. So if you had your tax refunds or your wages garnished or Social Security checks, seized or reduced, prior to that, your loans could potentially still be in default today, even if you didn't experience any collection activity for the last several years. And that's because all of that was paused due to the pandemic. Now that the government is restarting collections, it's really important to check this because, again, these collection actions are being turned on as we speak, and you could be at risk of losing your funds, of losing your benefits if you don't take steps to get out of default now. So the bottom line, what we're telling you today is to go and log on to studentaid.gov and or call the default resolution group to check to see if you have any loans in default. So very briefly, we're going to go over how to find this information on studentaid.gov. So you will first go to the government's website, studentaid.gov. You then click the login button. If you have not set up an account, you've not used this before, we've gone over this in the past. We also have a really great video that walks you through how to find this information and how to set up an account and navigate studentaid.gov that you can access after this presentation. But once you're logged into your account, you will be taken to the dashboard. And if your loans are not in default, this is what the dashboard will look like. This is what you should see. But if your loans are in default, you will actually get a big red banner right at the top of the page that will alert you to the fact that you have loans in default. So that is one quick place to check to see if you have loans in default. But there are a few other spots where you can check this as well. So another option that you have here is the View Details button. So if you click on View Details or you scroll down, you will actually see all of the details and the breakdown of your federal student loans. So this is what that page looks like. If you continue to scroll down on that page, it'll take you through all the federal student loans that you have. And it will also show you the status of those loans. So all of your loans will appear here. And if you look at the loan status, it will tell you whether or not it is in default. So that is another place to see which of your loans are in default and what the current status of those loans are. And with that, I'm going to turn it over to Kira now to talk about what to do if your loans are in default, how to get them out of default.
Thanks, Anna. And I will also, so we're going to do some tech magic here, so bear with me. But as we are doing that, I will also say that one of the great things about studentaid.gov is that when you log in and you land on your dashboard, if you click the contact button, it will take you to the contact info. If you have different people you need to contact on different types of loans you have that are in default, it'll provide the contact information for those groups as well. So studentaid.gov is an incredible resource, and I hope that everyone after today will log in. And we have some additional resources at the end of this presentation that we'll share with you that has useful links on how to navigate studentaid.gov. But okay, so we've covered consequences of default. We've talked about how folks get into default. The next step is how do I get them out of default? So there are 4 primary ways to get your loans out of default. The first one is to pay off all of your debt. You can either pay it all off up front, pay the entirety of the debt up front, or the government gives you an option to enter into a payment agreement where your loans will continue being in default, but you can say, okay, I'm going to pay this over months. For most folks, that option is either not available or not the best option. Another option to get out of default is to consolidate your defaulted loans into a new direct consolidation loan. Another option is to enter into what's called a rehabilitation agreement, where the loan will be put back into good standing after you make 9 on-time monthly payments in a row. We're also going to walk through how to do this. Last, you can apply for a statutory discharge to cancel or forgive the debt you have in default, and if the Department of Education grants that discharge. In June, we did a training on different types of statutory discharge programs, and in many of them, you can still apply for those types of relief, even if your loans are in default. So we're going to walk through the ins and outs of the 3 most common ways folks get out of default: consolidation, loan rehabilitation, and statutory discharges. One flag before we move on is that loan rehabilitation is very different from a payment agreement, but we're going to talk more about that in just a little bit. So they are not the same, and loan rehabilitation is a better option for most people. But again, these are the 3 ways that most folks typically get out of default on their federal student loans. All right. So let's start with consolidation. When you consolidate a federal loan, the consolidation loan, the new loan, pays off the prior loan. Now, you can consolidate just one loan, or you can consolidate multiple federal loans into a new direct consolidation loan. You consolidate a loan by submitting an application to a federal student loan servicer indicating which loans you want to consolidate into a new direct consolidation loan. You can do it either online or via paper application. But when you are consolidating your loans out of default, you must apply for an income-driven repayment plan or complete 3 voluntary on-time full monthly payments before that loan is taken out of default. We're going to talk about this in just a second. You can submit your IDR application, your income-driven repayment application, with your consolidation application, and this will move your loans out of default. For many folks, consolidating is one of the fastest ways to get their loans out of default. Now, a couple of folks will not be able to consolidate their loans out of default. So first, you generally cannot consolidate out of default if your wages are already being garnished by the Department of Education, if the Department of Education has issued what's called a wage garnishment order. If that is the case for you, you should seek out assistance from an attorney, from a legal aid organization or a private attorney, because they may be able to help get that order removed. But you would not be able to consolidate your loans out of default on your own generally. Additionally, folks that only have a single consolidation loan generally cannot consolidate out of default because that single consolidation loan can't be reconsolidated. However, if you owe other loans that you can consolidate with a consolidation loan, the department will let you do so. The general rule is that you can only consolidate a loan once, but you can consolidate a consolidation loan with other loans. So let's walk through what this looks like. Okay, because this gets very confusing for borrowers. So if you have just one regular federal loan, you can consolidate that into a consolidation loan. If you have multiple loans that have never been consolidated, you can consolidate them together into a consolidation loan. If you have a loan and a consolidation loan, you can consolidate those together into a second consolidation loan. If you have a consolidation loan and a consolidation loan, then you can consolidate them together into a second consolidation loan. However, if you just have a single consolidation loan, you generally cannot reconsolidate it on its own. The exception here is that if you have a FFEL consolidation loan. But generally, this is also another instance where you may want to seek out legal assistance to figure out your options to get out of default on your federal student loans. Couple things I wanted to flag that you should consider before consolidating your loans. So consolidating your loans may reset your income-driven repayment plan forgiveness clock. When you're in an IDR plan, there are certain periods of repayment where if you make qualifying payments at the end of that repayment period, your loans are forgiven. We're going to be talking about this in much more depth at the next training in October. So I hope all of you will join us. The thing for you to know today is that if you consolidate your loans, it could reset your income-driven repayment plan forgiveness clock. However, if you're in default, that issue may not stop you because resetting the clock may be better than continuing to experience collections. In addition, the consolidation loan's principal will include the interest, principal, and fees that you owe on the defaulted loan. So it could mean that you pay more over the life of the loan. But again, owing a new consolidation loan where the principal includes those sums of money is likely worth it if it stops collections from proceeding. And then last, the consolidation loan's interest rate is an average of the loans being consolidated as well. So these are 3 factors to think about. Again, if you're looking at this and at the end of this presentation, you say, oh, I don't know which option I want, you can always seek out legal help from a legal aid organization or a private attorney that works on student loan issues. Now, there are 2 ways to apply to consolidate your loans. And I would like to walk through the online application together. And I'd like to pitch you on why this is the better way to do it. So I want you to be very familiar with this application so that if you need to consolidate out of default, you know what it looks like and you know what to do. The reason that the online application is better in my mind is that it auto-populates information that you've already input to studentaid.gov and that the Department of Education already has about you. And it also automatically includes the income-driven repayment application, which is also great. And the last big benefit is that it tends to be faster. The application will be granted faster if you apply online versus applying on paper. So we're going to walk through the application together. If you are on studentaid.gov, you are going to go to loan repayment. And then you're going to see here on the left, you're going to go down to consolidate loans. You're going to click that. And then you're going to be on the consolidation application webpage. You will log into your account on studentaid.gov to apply, but today we're going to do a demo. And yes, I know it's a demo. So this is what it looks like. It can take 30 minutes. It is relatively quick. The first thing is they're going to tell you what to expect. Next, you're going to have to input your contact information. Your social security number. You should make sure that however you input your name at the top will match how you sign the application at the end. You need to make sure that your current permanent address is correct. If it is not, then you can go into your account settings with the Department of Education to change the address that the Department of Education has for you. You can input your driver's license information, but you don't have to. That's optional. Then you'll be asked to input your employment information. If you're not employed, you'll just check this box. And we're going to keep going. Then here's where the magic happens. It's going to auto-populate the loans that you owe. And so you can click which loans you would like to consolidate. And again, you can consolidate one loan or many loans into a new direct consolidation loan. Then it will give you an estimate of how much you will owe on the new consolidation loan and the new interest rate on that consolidation loan as well. You'll continue after selecting the correct loans. You're going to want to double check that the loans that you want to be consolidated are the ones that are checked here on this application. It'll ask you if you have loans in a grace period, meaning that period after you're enrolled, where you don't have to make payments. If you want them to delay processing your application, you do not. So select no. And then the thing about a consolidation application is that it enables you to select your loan servicer. And so it will ask if you want to keep your current loan servicer, or if you want to select a new loan servicer. Here are the loan servicers that you can select. You can select any of them. They all have the same rough pros and cons. It's up to you. You could do a little bit of Googling ahead of time, but there are not radical differences between the servicers. You'll select your servicer here, and then it will ask you if you're consolidating for public service loan forgiveness. You can say yes or no. That will not change the loan servicer that you have now. Then you'll continue. Then here's the other magic part. You'll be able to select whether or not you want to submit an income-driven repayment application. Or if you want to repay based on a set repayment period, a fixed payment repayment plan. I will tell you the vast majority of folks Anna and I work with in default get into default in part because they can't afford their loans. So for the vast majority of people, applying for an income-driven repayment plan makes more sense for them. But you could go either way. For today, I'm going to select income-driven repayment plan just so you can see what it looks like. We're going to continue. If you have not provided the Department of Education authorization to retrieve your federal tax information in the past, it will ask you. What this does is it allows the Department of Education to pull your income information from last year's taxes. And in the future, it will allow the Department of Education the ability to automatically pull your income information from last year's taxes. You can always withdraw your consent. And so you will choose whether or not you want to do that. Today, we're going to provide approval. Now, it's going to ask you questions about your family size, et cetera, because that will affect how the Department of Education calculates your monthly payment amount on an income-driven repayment plan. We're going to talk about the different income-driven repayment plans together during our next training in October. But this is what the application looks like. So we're going to say, yes, we're married. No, we're not separated today. Yes, we can access our spouse's income information. And we're going to say, yes, we filed our taxes jointly. And then it will ask you for your spouse's information if you filed jointly. And then it will, if you provided permission, it will pull your tax information. If it's not able to pull your tax information from Treasury, from the IRS, it may ask you to upload last year's tax returns or other documentation to prove your income amount. It'll ask you if you have changes in family size. Really, this is a question of if you are going to be a parent, a new parent, or you're having you're going to take custody of another child or have another child. And then it will import your information. It'll ask you how many children you have. Let's say we have one, and any other non-child dependents, excluding your spouse and children who live with you and receive more than half of their support from you. And it'll ask you if your income has significantly decreased since your last tax return. And it'll ask you if you have taxable income and if your spouse has taxable income. Like I said before, it may ask you to upload things like a W-2 or your last year's tax returns. And it may, if you file your taxes jointly, ask you to upload your spouse's documentation as well. This is only if the Department of Education isn't able to automatically pull your income information from last year's taxes. So this could be that there's a problem with their system. It could be that you don't provide consent to allow them to do that as well. Then it'll ask you to select your IDR plan. We'll talk more about the plans during our training in October. Now, when you submit a consolidation application, you need to submit references. These references are not going to be used to determine whether or not you're eligible for a direct consolidation loan. It's only used for the Department of Education to contact you if there's later a problem with your loans. So you will need to add 2 references of folks who do not live with you and who have known you for at least 3 years. So you'll input that information here. And then you will need to read through all of the terms and conditions. We're going to scroll through this quickly, but I recommend that you read this carefully because this is the loan agreement that will tell you what your rights are with this new direct consolidation loan under this new loan contract that you'll be signing for the direct consolidation loan. We got more terms and conditions, so we're going to keep scrolling, but you should read it. More terms and conditions. We're going to keep scrolling, but again, you should read all of this. And then we have more terms and conditions. So don't be surprised, but again, you should read this. And then at the end of the terms and conditions, you will have to check saying that you've read, understood, and agree to the terms and conditions of the note, this new contract that you're entering into with the Department of Education. Then you will continue. Now, you'll have the opportunity to review all of your information. You should review it very carefully. And then once you say, okay, we're good, everything's correct, this is right, you will be able to provide your electronic signature. Again, this needs to match your name the way that you provided it at the top. You submit, and voila, submission. A direct consolidation application is in with the Department of Education, and they will process it for you. They will send it to the servicer that you selected, and you will need to watch the mail to see when that application is granted, or they'll notify you if your application is denied for any reason. Okay, so as you can see, lots of boxes, lots of pages, but actually pretty straightforward as things go. The paper form is much more prone to errors and is more difficult for folks to fill out. It is 32 pages long, in part because of the terms and conditions, but also you will need, if you use the paper form, you will need to identify each of the loans that you want to consolidate together. And this can trip folks up because you need to clearly identify those loans for the Department of Education. You'll need to fill out this chart, which is on this slide with the loan code. You'll have to identify the loan holder, servicer name, address, area code, and phone number. The Department of Education makes clear that you have to identify the servicer name and the state where they are located, plus their phone number. It says loan account number. Don't worry about that if you don't have it. You can find it on your servicer's website. It might also show it on your monthly bill. And then really, really important, you need to provide your estimated payoff amount. So the outstanding principal, fees, and any interest that has accrued on that loan. And then you have to do that for each loan that you want to consolidate. Again, this is a place where I see many people get tripped up because they mix up a number or they mix up the servicer. And this is also why I think the online application is much easier. The other piece is you will need to separately complete a paper income-driven repayment application and then attach that to your consolidation application if you're using the paper form. You can submit them both together to the servicer that you want to service that new consolidation loan. We have links at the end to the PDFs for the various applications, and we also have the servicer addresses where you would need to send these applications when you submit your consolidation application. Now, what to expect after you submit your consolidation application. You should watch your mail and watch your email very carefully for notifications about your application. They're going to provide you with a notice that the consolidation application has been approved or denied, and they will also tell you which loans are within the consolidation application. Once you receive notice that the consolidation is granted, you need to check that all the loans you wanted in the consolidation loan were included. If not, or if there were loans that were included that you did not want included, you need to call your servicer right away to correct the mistake. You only have a limited period of time to correct that. Most important is we do not want you to redefault on your new direct consolidation loan. So it is really important to have a plan on how you're going to repay your loans moving forward. We're going to talk about income-driven repayment plans, which again, base your monthly payment based on a portion of your income each month in October. But there are other strategies that you may be able to use to repay your loans. it is really, really important that you have a strategy to repay your loans. If you need help, this is another time where you could reach out to your local legal aid, elder law organization, or private attorney for additional assistance. Now, here's what you can expect after you've submitted your consolidation application if collections have started. So if collections have not started on your defaulted loan, and you get notice that collection is going to start, then you can respond to the default collection notice by requesting a hearing in writing or submitting an objection and telling the Department of Education that you submitted a consolidation application on whatever date you submitted it and that you do not want collections to start. So this is one way you can respond to the notice that the department has to provide to you before it starts collections. If collections have already started, they may continue until your consolidation application is granted and your loan is dispersed. Okay, so there we have consolidation, which is one way out of default. The next way out of default is rehabilitation. So Anna, take it away.
Yeah, so we have talked about consolidating loans to get out of default, which is one of the easier options for most people. However, not everyone is going to be able to consolidate their loans, and it's not always the right option for some folks. So another option that you may have if you have a student loan in default is to complete a loan rehabilitation. So a loan rehabilitation is essentially an agreement. So it's a contract and an agreement that you make with your loan servicer. And in this agreement, you will agree to make 9 on-time monthly payments over a period of 10 months in exchange for your loans being taken out of default and placed back into good standing. So it's a really formal process. It's not just an agreement that you can make sort of informally to start paying. You actually have to enter into a formal agreement with your loan servicer. Next slide. So payments in a loan rehabilitation agreement can actually be as low as $5 a month. So if you are thinking about doing this and you're really scared that the payments are going to be really unaffordable, just know that these payments are actually based on your income and your family size. So just like the income-driven repayment program, with these loan rehabilitation payments, you are going to have a payment based on your income and family size that will hopefully make it easier for you to make those 9 on-time payments to get your loans out of default. Generally, the payments are 15% of your income above 150% of the poverty line for your family size. So there is a formal calculation. Your loan servicer will tell you what it is, but you will need to provide information about your situation in order to get an accurate number from them about what it is. Next slide. So right now, folks can actually only use the loan rehabilitation option once to get out of default. This is going to change in 2027. The new law that just came out actually includes a benefit in that it's going to change this to allow people to complete a loan rehabilitation twice, which is a good thing, but that does not take effect until 2027. So right now, if you are in default and you've done a loan rehabilitation in the past, you're not going to be eligible to do it again at this point in time. You'll have to look at your other options. But if you've never used that, or if you never completed a loan rehabilitation agreement that you actually previously entered into, you can still use this option. Next slide. So to get out of default and to complete a loan rehabilitation, the first step is to call your loan servicer. Now, if your loans are in default, they're going to be with a default servicer, most likely the default resolution group, but it may not be the default resolution group if you have an older type of loan, such as an older type of FFEL or Perkins loan. So you want to call them first and let them know that you want to enter into a rehabilitation agreement to get your loan out of default and to stop collections if you're encountering any collection activity. You should be prepared to tell them what your income is, what your family size is, and the servicer will, on the phone with you, should be able to let you know what they think your estimated monthly payment will be. Now, at that point, you can either choose to begin paying right away, or you can actually wait for the loan servicer to send you the actual agreement and finalize the agreement before you begin making payments. That's probably the better option if people want to know exactly what that payment is going to be, because you may have to provide some additional information that could change your situation. So again, you need to submit your income information and proof of what your income is for the default servicer to actually give you the correct payment amount that you will need to make. Once you submit that, then the loan servicer will send you that agreement. So once you get the rehabilitation agreement that shows you what your payment amount is going to be and what you must pay a month in order to complete this successfully, you have to sign and return that agreement. Now, after that, you will then make 9 on-time monthly payments based on the amount that the servicer tells you to pay for your loans to be removed from default. Now, as soon as you complete that agreement and you make your 9 payments, your loans will be removed from default and they will be transferred to a new loan servicer. Now, once they're removed from default, you'll have a short period of time where you can actually sign up for an IDR plan. If you do that, that's a really great option because you will hopefully be able to maintain an affordable ongoing monthly payment that's based on your income and your family size. If you don't actually take that step at that point, your loans will be placed back into a standard plan. So make sure you watch out for notices about when your loans are taken out of default and who your new loan servicer is going to be, so that you can make a plan for how you're going to make your payments ongoing from there. Now, this is a big red flag. Next slide. For folks to watch out for at this point, this is where we see a lot of borrowers sort of get stuck and fall back into default or fall behind again on their student loans, is once they actually complete the loan rehabilitation program and their loans are with a new loan servicer, they forget that next step of actually making sure that they're on the right repayment plan for them, and they don't apply for IDR at that point, and they can't afford the standard plan that they're just going to be placed back into automatically. And because they can't afford that standard plan, they start to fall behind, and lo and behold, 9 months later, they're back in default, and now they're in an even worse spot because they don't have the option to use loan rehabilitation to get out again. So make sure once you complete the loan rehabilitation agreement that you are signing up for an IDR plan if that's something that you need. Now, if you can afford the standard plan, that's fine too. But for most folks that we work with, if they're struggling and they've fallen behind on their loans and they're in default, an IDR plan is really going to be the best option going forward. So a note about loan rehabilitation and collections. People ask us all the time, oh, if I'm facing collections and my Social Security benefits are being reduced, if I just start the loan rehabilitation, will that stop everything? Unfortunately, no, it doesn't stop everything right away. If collection has already started, entering into a loan rehabilitation agreement will not stop collections automatically. You can ask the loan servicer if they will potentially do that, but generally speaking, those types of collections will continue until you've completed 5 months of those payments. So after 5 months of those payments, you can call and ask the loan servicer once again to stop it, particularly if it's a wage garnishment. But generally speaking, that does not happen automatically. Now, if collection actions haven't started and you're in a loan rehabilitation agreement, and you get a notice that you're going to be subject to collections, you should definitely file an objection right away and let them know, hey, my loans are on a loan rehabilitation. I'm trying to get out of default. Let them know that right away so that you can try to avoid those collections.
All right. So that is a second option that most folks use out of default. And then the third option is using the statutory discharge programs to cancel or discharge a defaulted loan. So this is also an option that we commonly use to discharge some or all of a borrower's federal student loan debt. So defaulted loans are eligible for many discharge and cancellation programs, even if they're subject to collections already. even if they're already in default, you can still apply to discharge those loans. Again, we went over the different discharge and cancellation programs during our training in June, and we will make sure that you have a link to that webinar as well. If you've already applied for a discharge or cancellation program and you're waiting for a decision, and while you're waiting for a decision on your application for relief, you receive notice that your loans are in default and collections are about to start, you can object to the collections by telling the government in writing that you have applied for a cancellation program, and you should attach a copy of the application for relief and explain when you applied. So just tell them the date that you applied for relief. If you receive notice that your loans are in default and will be subject to collections, but you haven't yet applied, you can still apply for a discharge or cancellation program. But to stop collections from starting, you should apply within the time period the notice specifies and also submit an objection explaining, after you submit your application, explaining that you've applied for relief. And again, you need to attach your application. The discharge programs vary somewhat in terms of whether or not they will stop collections. So this isn't fail-safe, but certainly if your relief application has been granted, that will discharge your debt and that will remove it from default, which will mean you will no longer be subject to collections. Now, some folks will not be eligible for the options that we've talked about. They won't be able to pay off their debt. They won't be able to use a consolidation application or consolidation to take their loans out of default. They won't be able to get into a rehab agreement, a rehabilitation agreement, and they won't be eligible for a statutory discharge program. So what then? You might be able to object to the collection by explaining to the government that the collection would cause you financial hardship. Now, this isn't fail-safe either. It can be very difficult to get. The government defines financial hardship as being unable to afford basic life expenses, like you can't afford food, housing, medical expenses, if the government uses its collection powers. The government also requires that you attach documentation of your income and all of your expenses. So this is a tremendous undertaking to pull the physical copies of your last 2 years of tax return filings to submit with your financial hardship assertion, and copies of any bills, lease agreements, auto loan contracts, credit card bills, medical debt bills, and any other expense documentation that you can provide. You need to provide as much documentation as possible to show that collection will cause you financial hardship. In the past, when the Department of Education has sent out notice that it's going to engage in collections, it will also send borrowers a form that they can complete when they're asserting financial hardship. And so given we're not sure yet if the department is still using that form, but if you receive that form, you should use that form when asserting financial hardship. Okay, so we've covered a lot of ground today. We've covered a tremendous amount of content. And so I want to sum up a couple of key points here, because you've been given a lot of tools on why default happens, how to get out of default, and what your options are. So big picture, most important, you are not alone if you find that your federal student loans are in default. Millions of borrowers, and especially older borrowers, are in default on their federal student loans. The government can take wages, tax refunds, Social Security benefits, and other federal benefits or payments to pay off defaulted debt. And there is no statute of limitations on federal student loan collections. The government will send notices before it starts collections. If there's one thing you walk away from this training with, I hope you remember, if you get a notice, do not wait. You need to respond. You need to take action. You need to see if you can get out of default. Generally, you can get out of default by consolidating the defaulted loan or completing a loan rehabilitation agreement. In addition, you can getting your loans discharged or canceled will also resolve the default and will stop collections from continuing to occur. If you can't get out of default, you may be able to reduce or stop collections by objecting. One of the objections is that collections would cause you a financial hardship. But again, you have to provide proof, and you're going to need to provide a lot of documentation about all of your bills, all of your financial obligations, etc. So here we are with default. Now, it's okay to need additional help. This is incredibly confusing. Even for lawyers, the student loan system is incredibly confusing and complex and it takes folks time to learn. There is no downside to needing additional help. And there are folks who can help you with your federal student loans, navigating your options and helping you get out of default. You can contact your local legal aid organization to see if they can provide you with additional help. There are also some private attorneys across the country, and there are some private financial counseling organizations that also deal with student loan debt issues. Anna, anything else you'd like to add here?
Yeah, I think this would be a good time to take some questions that are specifically about default before we get into our, so there are other big news and updates, because we had really great questions in the chat, and I want to make sure that people are feeling, confident about some of the things we've talked about today. So one question that we got asked is, what about people who were on the SAFE plan and are being told by their loan servicer that they don't have to start making payments now and they won't be facing payments again until, January of next year or January of the year beyond that? Are those folks going to be potentially at risk of going into default?
So great question. If you are in a forbearance or deferment on your loans, that time does not start your default clock. So if you are currently enrolled in the SAVE plan, you are in a forbearance, which means that payments are not due, which means your default clock has not started. Now, that being said, that forbearance is because of a lawsuit challenging the legality of the SAVE plan. So we don't know yet when that forbearance is going to end. When that forbearance does end, if you miss payments, then that will count towards the default clock. So this is all to say you're okay right now, but you need to watch your email and your mail very carefully to make sure that you're up to speed on when that SAVE forbearance ends.
And we're going to be discussing what's going on with the repayment system and what's going to be changing with the income-driven repayments at our October webinar. So if you have specific questions about that or about how to manage repayment going forward with all these changes, please come to that webinar or watch that webinar after the fact, because there are a lot of changes coming. But just generally, if you are on any type of repayment plan that has $0 payments or any type of grace period, forbearance, or deferment where payments are not due, as Kira said, that's not going to count to your clock to start this sort of default time. Now, we got a couple other questions, and these are just general questions that we get from people as well that I want to make sure people are aware of. One of them is, what about can I just start making payments? If I'm in default, can I just start making payments and get back into good standing that way? So I heard on the news that the Department of Education said you can just get into an IDR plan and you can just start making payments and that will get you out of default. Is that an option, Kira?
No, unfortunately, you have to take these additional actions. You have to be in one of the appropriate vehicles to remove your loans from default. So if you just start making payments on a defaulted loan without entering into a rehabilitation agreement or consolidating that defaulted loan into a new loan, your loan will still be in default until it is paid off. So you need to make sure that you're in the right vehicle to remove your loan from default. And like we talked about previously when we were talking about paying off your loan to exit default, there's the option to enter into a payment agreement, but that is different from a rehabilitation agreement. The payment while you make payments in a payment agreement, your loan is still in default. So for almost all borrowers, they will do better entering into a rehabilitation agreement to bring their loan out of default more quickly, as opposed to entering a payment agreement.
Because remember that collection fees are also added while you're in default. And additionally, just making those payments without being in a loan rehabilitation or without first consolidating to get out of default and get back into good standing could mean that you could still face collection. So that is a really big flag. And just because you think you're making payments, that doesn't mean that you're not going to face some of these ongoing consequences, including all of the credit consequences that come with being in default. One other question that we get a lot is, what if I'm not in default yet, but I'm just behind on my payments? So I am, yeah, I've missed like 5 or 6 payments, but I'm not technically in default yet. What should I do in that situation?
Sure. So if you are not in default yet, you are in this beautiful period where you can still take immediate action to stop your loan from defaulting and prevent the risk of the government using its collection powers to collect your debt. So you can enroll in an income-driven repayment agreement to reduce your monthly bills, because then it will be calculated according to your income. And again, we're going to talk about the different types of income-driven repayment plans in October. You could call if you're not eligible for an income-driven repayment plan or the payments are still too high. You could use what's called a forbearance or deferment, which is a temporary status that can temporarily pause your bills from being due as well. The other option, of course, is to look and see if any of your loans might be dischargeable via a statutory discharge program. And again, we did a training on that in June as well. So you have options, certainly, before your loan goes into default. I think the most important thing to know if you're delinquent and you haven't made payments for a couple months is that you should not wait any longer. This will get worse the longer you wait to take action on your student loan situation.
And also generally after 90 days of missed payments, that's when you'll be considered to be delinquent. And when you go on studentaid.gov under your loan status, you will see that. You won't see default, but you'll see delinquent, which is a good indication that you need to take steps now. Because in addition to potentially, being in default at a later time, once you're in delinquent after 90 days, that actually is also going to impact your credit, and that's going to be reported to the credit reporting agencies, and you could see a drop in your credit at that point as well. And there was a question in the chat about, does this impact credit? Yes, falling behind on payments will impact credit. Definitely defaulting will impact your credit. You will also see that if you have a really high loan balance, that may potentially impact your credit as well. So you want to make sure that you don't increase that balance by, having those collection fees getting added on, and, finding a repayment plan that works for you to help you, bring that balance down. So those are really great questions. I think we have one more question that I think would be great to answer here, which is, why should I even bother getting out of default if I can't afford any payments? There's no way I'm ever going to pay my student loans back. Why should I even bother taking these steps to get out of default? I think that's a really hard question to answer. And I will just say, as we've said in this whole presentation, yeah, student loan debt is very difficult for a number of people to feel like they can ever get out of. However, there are ways to help make this easier for you going forward. You just really need to know all of your options here. And it can be really expensive to continue to be in default because, interest is still going to accrue, but all those collection fees are still going to be added. And over time, that can actually increase the amount of debt that you owe. And as we said before, the government can collect on this debt forever. If you don't take steps to get out of default or to get your loans canceled or discharged or paid off, they can collect on that debt forever. And it may get harder and harder to deal with over time, particularly if you are retiring. Your Social Security benefits aren't protected here. The government can take those Social Security benefits to pay this debt off. So this is not necessarily something that will get easier to deal with. And even if you don't think you can afford the payment that you're on now, don't discount or count out the IDR program. For a lot of people, the IDR program will provide really, really affordable payments that will basically, make sure that you're not going to face any type of collection consequences. And you may find that you're on an IDR payment for the rest of your life. That may be something that you are going to have to deal with. But still, if you have a $0 payment or, a $10 a month payment on an IDR plan, that may be cheaper and more affordable and less financially devastating than being in default and facing all those collection consequences. I don't know if there's anything else we wanted to add there, Kira.
So the only other, so 100% agreed on how difficult it is if you know that you're never going to be able to pay down that debt. I just want to second what Anna was saying about the value, or at least looking into the value of an income-driven repayment plan. Another thing to flag about IDR plans is that after a certain amount of time in qualifying payments, your loans are canceled. But you're not accruing qualifying time while your loans are in default. And so that would be another reason in my mind to consider trying to remove your loans out of default and enter into an income-driven repayment plan. The periods before forgiveness vary by plan. They are also changing. We're going to talk about this in just a sec with the new law that was passed on July 4th. But we will be talking about all of this in a lot of depth in the training in October.
In addition, we got a couple questions in the Q&A about defaulted time and public service. So if you work in a public service job, that is an absolute another reason for you to get out of default, because time in default does not count towards public service loan forgiveness. So if you are working in a public service job, you may be eligible to have your loans canceled after you make 10 years of qualifying payments. And unfortunately, time in default does not count toward that. Now, we discussed the Public Service Loan Forgiveness Program in our June webinar, so definitely refer back to that. But that's just another reason for getting out of default and getting into a qualifying repayment plan. So if you're working for Public Service Loan Forgiveness, if you're working towards that, you need to take those steps in order to make sure that your time is going to be counted.
And also, if you're in default now, but you know that you've accrued, that you're working for a public service employer, you want to go for public service loan forgiveness. If you remove your loans from default, you can continue accruing public service loan forgiveness eligible time, and also you can apply for relief as well. Once your loans are out of default, that is the thing. So all is not lost if you are currently in default.
And in our previous webinar, we did discuss some back credits that were applied for folks and what would potentially count for public service loan forgiveness, and IDR cancellation going forward that may not have counted in the past. So definitely refer back to our June webinar for that, and to our website, studentloanborrowerassistance.org, for more information on that. But time in default has never counted and will not count going forward.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that, please keep submitting questions. We will still have some additional time, but I also want to make sure that we have some additional news that's on your radar. So, like Anna and I have been referencing throughout this presentation, there is a huge change coming when it comes to student loan law. The one big beautiful bill that was passed on July 4th has a lot of changes to borrowers' repayment options. We are going to discuss this in depth. There are so many changes that we couldn't cram it in while also talking about default. But there is one really important deadline that I want to make sure that all of you are aware of. Parent Plus borrowers today are not eligible for an income-driven repayment plan unless they consolidate their loan into a consolidation loan, into a direct consolidation loan. Once they have a direct consolidation loan today, they're eligible for income contingent repayment. That is changing under this new law. Parent Plus borrowers that have not consolidated their loans into their Parent Plus loans into a direct consolidation loan will not be eligible for any income-driven repayment plan after July 1st, 2026. If you have a Parent Plus loan, it is really important that you consider consolidating that Parent Plus loan and enrolling that Parent Plus loan that's now consolidated into an income-driven repayment plan. If I'm saying the word Parent Plus loan and you're going, Kira, what? That is okay. We have a video decoding the different types of federal student loans in our resources at the end of this presentation that you will have. So you'll be able to look at studentaid.gov and determine whether or not you have a Parent Plus loan. This is a huge deadline. Please do not ignore it. Please log into studentaid.gov and check your student loan types. It is really, really important because income-driven repayment is one of the key ways that folks can make their monthly bills more affordable. The other piece of news that I wanted to make sure that we talked about is that we've been hearing that borrowers have had a lot of issues with the total and permanent disability discharge process. We think that these are temporary issues, so you can certainly still apply for total and permanent disability discharges. However, if you're having issues, you may need to work with an attorney for additional assistance, but you can also file complaints with federal student aid, with the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Some states have ombuds offices, and your congressional offices also have constituent affairs offices that are designated to provide you with additional assistance. This is a perfect complaint to file with your congressional office as well. And then they have different lines to communicate with federal student aid and the Department of Education. So if you are running into that issue, if you've submitted a total and permanent disability discharge and you've been waiting for a while, or you've gotten confusing notices, you should absolutely file a complaint, and you might consider getting additional legal help to help you get that relief.
And I will say that this applies broadly. We've had some other questions as well about people who should have been eligible already for cancellation under the income-driven repayment program or cancellation under the borrower defense to repayment program, and they haven't heard, or they've seen on their accounts that it's still under review. If you are stuck and you think that your loans should be canceled or discharged under any of those programs, and you're having issues and your loan servicer is not helping, definitely file complaints, reach out to your local congressional officials to see if they can help you, and potentially seek legal help or additional help to get you over that hurdle in that next step, because it could be an error on the Department of Education side, but it also could be that there's an issue with your application and you need some additional help submitting that. So again, we've got information in our resources about filing complaints. We've also got this information on our website, studentloanborrowerassistance.org. We'll put that link in the chat here. I will get that link for folks.
I will also flag for folks that if you have applied for a statutory discharge, borrower defense, total and permanent disability discharge, closed school discharge, and others, if you haven't heard anything, you should also log into studentaid.gov to see if those loans are still outstanding. We are hearing that there can be a delay when folks are getting their notices as well. So certainly file a complaint, but also log into studentaid.gov to see if those loans are still outstanding on your account. Okay, so we have plenty of additional resources for you today. First thing, we've got some important links. We've got studentaid.gov. We have a video on where to find your student loan information on studentaid.gov. We have a video on the loan types. We were talking about things like FFEL and direct loans and Parent Plus loans. That video decodes what those loan types are. And the other video also shows you where you can find your loan types on your student loan account. We have the link for the online consolidation application. As you're walking through that application, feel free to rewatch this video. We have the link to the default resolution group website, and then we also have a link to the June webinar on student loan discharges and total and permanent disability discharges as well. We got a number of questions about statutory discharges. Please go back and watch that webinar and join us in October. We will have more opportunities for questions, and we would love to talk about whatever questions you have. We also have important links for the paper applications as well, and the addresses where you can send consolidation applications as well. We have other videos about the student loan system, and they are linked here. So everything from knowing what type of loan you have to information about FFEL and Perkins loans to older student loan types, information about Parent Plus. One thing to note on the Parent Plus loan video is that it was produced before the July 4th bill was passed into law. And so there are additional changes. You should still know that there is a deadline on when you must consolidate your Parent Plus loans to maintain their eligibility for income-driven repayment moving forward. But ton of information. Anna and I are the stars. So always fun. So you'll have more of us explaining all the ins and outs of the student loan system. And then Anna, would you like to talk a little bit about the student loan toolkit?
Yeah, so folks have heard us talk about this in previous webinars, but we have a toolkit that essentially goes over the ins and outs of the basics of the federal student loan system, including how to identify whether or not you're potentially eligible for some of these programs we discussed today, including the loan forgiveness program. So if you are interested in just another tool to help you sort of figure out the best way to manage your student loan debt, I would say absolutely download this toolkit, print it off. It's got fillable pages where you can actually use some checklists to see whether or not you're potentially eligible for these programs, or if you should take additional steps to make sure that you're on track for your student loans, that you're not facing these really negative consequences. We also have a really great website. I know I have referred to that a number of times in this webinar that we are updating continuously. I'm actually going through and updating a lot of those pages as we speak, now that the new law has come out and we've got all these changes that are coming. This is a really great website if you just want to stay up to date on what's happening and you want to get the latest news. We have a blog where we post generally, once a month, sometimes more frequently, just to let borrowers know in a really easily understandable format how they should be proceeding with all of the noise that is out there. There's a lot of misinformation going around on the student loan system, including misinformation from loan servicers and misinformation from even the Department of Education. So we want to make sure that folks have the most accurate information that's out there. So this is another resource, but again, because it's managed by a small team of attorneys at NCLC, we are continuously updating it. So there may be some information that's outdated that we're going to go through and make sure is correct. But subscribe to our blog if you want to get the most up-to-date information directly emailed to you in your inbox. That would be, I think, a really great tool if you are looking for more ways to stay on top of what really is the important stuff that you absolutely need to know about, not necessarily just all of the pings about student loan news that come out every single day. We will let you know how to cut through all of that noise and figure out what you need to know about now.
And there are opportunities for you to share your stories with us, and the option for you to give us permission to share your stories with elected officials so that they can change the policies that really aren't working for you, your families, and to make it work better for everyone. And then last but not least, if you have other forms of debt that you need help with, we have a free resource called Surviving Debt that has a ton of information about other forms of debt, car loans, mortgages, you name it, we do it. It's in the book. So I would recommend looking at that as well. And so we will send the slide deck to you after this presentation is over. But we have another couple questions that I wanted to make sure that we turn to. So we have one question where the individual is concerned because they got a Parent Plus loan only in their name so that their husband wouldn't be obligated to repay after they passed away. If they use his tax return to consolidate, does that make him responsible for repayment on the Parent Plus loan? Fabulous question. The tax information is for the IDR application, not the consolidation application. So just because you consolidate your loans does not mean it doesn't change anything. Your loans would still be subject to a death discharge if they're taken out in your name. You input your husband's tax information if you file your taxes jointly. That would be the only time that you would do that. And the only reason that you would do that is for the income-driven repayment plan application, not the consolidation application, even though they're merged in the online consolidation application because they're trying to streamline how people get into affordable repayment plans. So consolidation would not mean that your husband would be liable on the debt after you pass.
And I think it's a good flag too, just so folks are aware of that in the federal student loan system, only one borrower is going to be responsible for that debt. So unlike private student loans, where you often will see that there are co-signers or multiple borrowers who are responsible for that debt, in the federal student loan system, including Parent Plus loans, only one parent takes out the loan. So it's not something where two parents would take out the loan and two parents would be responsible. Only one parent will be responsible for the loan, and that's the person who takes out the loan. And if they consolidate that loan, that's not going to change. There's not going to be additional person that gets added onto that. Also, generally speaking, for federal student loans, if you pass away and you have outstanding student loan debt, that is generally not going to be passed on to any of your family members after that. We've gone over that in the past. In our June webinar, we talked about death discharges, but essentially your loans will be discharged upon your death. And if your family, wants to make sure that happens, there, is a way to submit a death certificate, proof of death to the loan servicers afterwards to make sure that, there would be no issue going forward. So great question. I do want to also flag, though, that whatever you're doing in the federal student loan system, make sure you're staying in the federal student loan system, because all of this changes if you consolidate or refinance your federal loans into a private loan. And generally speaking, we do not advise people at all to ever consider refinancing or consolidating their federal loans into private loans. Because if you do that, it changes all the rules and also means that you're not going to be eligible for any types of federal benefits that come with the federal student loan system. So income-driven repayments, forbearances, deferments, options for getting on a default, getting your loans forgiven or canceled, that is not going to be available to you if you refinance or consolidate into the private loan system. And a lot of people incorrectly assume that they have private loans, and they're like, well, it doesn't matter, I have private loans already, so I'm just going to refinance with a private lender. Don't ever take that a step without first verifying that your loans are actually private. As we said earlier, 98% of loans that are out there are in the federal loan system. And you may have a loan that is serviced by a bank or a school, and you're thinking that's private. No, that may still be a federal loan. Maybe an older type of federal loan that's not around anymore, but it still potentially could be a federal loan. So you just want to make sure you're very careful when you're taking any of those steps and you're engaging with the private loan system. There's a lot of scams out there. There are a lot of lenders and servicers that are trying to take advantage of all the chaos in the system. So just be very, very careful. And if you think you've fallen victim to a scam, definitely file complaints. That is something you want to file a complaint with your state attorney general's office, in addition to the other complaint systems that we've mentioned here.
So 2 other quick things. Also, just to reiterate, absolutely think long and hard before refinancing your federal student loans. I cannot tell you how many folks we've received calls from, emails from, that say they were eligible for something like public service loan forgiveness and have lost that eligibility because they refinanced their federal student loans into a private loan, and it is devastating. So 100% agreed, Anna. I wanted to answer 2 quick questions that folks also raised. One is, can you apply for a income-driven repayment plan and a deferment at the same time? When you apply for an income-driven repayment plan, you can ask that your servicer put you in a forbearance to stop payments while they process your paperwork. Typically, you would not ask for a deferment when you apply for an income-driven repayment plan. But at least while they're processing your application, you can stop payments, and then you would continue payments in the IDR plan. You can ask for forbearances or deferments while you're enrolled in an IDR plan. However, there are different types of forbearances and deferments, so it's not a guarantee that just because you ask for it, you'd be able to get it. The other question we have in the chat is, I have a Parent Plus loan and my payment starts in November 2025. When can I do a consolidation loan? You could apply to consolidate today. And like we went through before, you may choose just to consolidate just that consolidation loan. If you do it online, you can just check your Parent Plus loan in the application.
And in fact, I would actually recommend it. It's probably a good idea to start the consolidation process now, because what we've heard from the Department of Education is that the consolidation needs to be completed by that deadline that we gave you. And if it's not completed at that point, if you're still being processed, your application is still being processed, you're not going to be eligible for income-driven repayment going forward. So I would just highly recommend that people with Parent Plus loans, or really anyone who wants wants to consolidate and wants to maintain their eligibility for the income-driven repayment plans going forward, and for the current ones that are gonna, continue going forward, to not wait.
Mhm.
We'll go over this again in October.
Yep, we will. But between now and October, please look at these resources. Please come with your questions. We love seeing the questions that you all have. Our goal is to try to demystify the student loan system for you. We know how hard it is. We know how complicated it is. And our goal in these presentations is to make it as accessible as possible. So thank you everyone for joining us today. Hopefully you learned something you didn't know, and we will see you in October.
And the registration link for October is in the chat now. If you are not able to attend live, again, you will get sent the materials after the fact. So make sure you register so that you can get those materials sent to you. Thank you all.